There are just 18 days until Election Day, and more than 10 million votes have already been cast. And with early voting now underway in Arizona, former President Barack Obama held a rally in Tucson tonight in support of Vice President Harris and Governor Tim Walz. He said this about Donald Trump.
Donald Trump wants us to think that this country is hopelessly divided between us and them, between the, quote, real Americans, by which he means his supporters, and the outsiders who don't support him. Because having people divided and angry and aggrieved and resentful, he figures that boosts his chances to get elected. Now, so those are his intentions. I do have to point out that along with his intentions, there is also a question of his competence. Have you seen him lately? I mean, he is out there, he's given 2.5 hour speeches, just word salads. You have no idea what he's talking about. He's talking about Hannibal Lecter. He's talking about this. He's talking about that. He held a town hall meeting where he just, let me explain, because I've done a lot of town hall meetings. The point of a town hall meeting is to take questions. He just decided, you know what, I'm going to stop taking questions, and then he's swaying to Ave Maria and YMCA for about half an hour. Folks are standing there not sure what's happening. Can you imagine if I did that? Can you imagine if Ruben did that right in the middle? Now, our playlist would probably be better. But he called himself the father of IVF. I do not know what that means. You do not either. He said January 6th was a day of love. Do not boo, vote. It made January 6th sound like it was Woodstock. You would be worried if your grandpa was acting like this. No, I'm not joking. You would, right? You'd call up your cousins and you say, have you noticed? So imagine it coming from a guy who wants to be given unchecked power. For Donald Trump and his cronies, freedom means that the powerful can do whatever they please. That's his definition of freedom. I want to fire workers for trying to organize a union. I should be free to do so. You know, they want the freedom to throw out votes if they lose an election. They want to control what women can and can't do to their bodies. In other words, for Trump, freedom is getting away with stuff. And it's like he said in the middle of the pandemic, when he said, I do not take any responsibility at all. I'm not sure any American president has ever uttered those words other than Donald Trump. I do not take any. People were dying. Hospitals overrun. I do not take any responsibility at all. That's his idea of freedom. I do what I want, and I'm not responsible for anything. We have a broader idea of freedom. We believe in the freedom to provide for our families if we're willing to work. The freedom to breathe clean air and drink clean water. The freedom to send our kids to school without worrying if they'll come home safely. We believe that true freedom gives each of us the right to make decisions about our own lives, how we worship, who we marry, what our family looks like. And we also believe that freedom requires us to recognize that other people have the freedom to make different choices. And it doesn't make them bad people. It doesn't make them evil people. It doesn't make them enemies of the state.
On Tuesday, Barack Obama and Tim Walz are headed to Wisconsin for the first day of early voting in that state. Barack Obama wasn't the only one campaigning in a critical battleground state today. The Democratic candidate herself, Kamala Harris, was in Michigan today holding events throughout the state. Here's what Vice President Harris said in Oakland County, Michigan, just a few hours ago.
We are the underdog and running as the underdog, but make no mistake, we will win. We will win. We will win. Yes, we will. We will win. And we will win because we understand, and we will win because we understand what is at stake. America is ready to chart a new way forward, ready for a new and optimistic generation of leadership that is all of you, is all of us, which is why Democrats, Republicans, Independents are supporting our campaign. In fact, you may have seen earlier this week over 100 Republican leaders from across the country joined me on the campaign trail, including some who served under Donald Trump's administration, because, you know, they know him best. They understand what's at stake. And I believe Americans want a president and deserve a president who works for all the American people. All the American people. And that has been, as you all know, the story of my entire career. I've only in my career had one client, the people. One client. As a young courtroom prosecutor, I protected women and children. As Attorney General of California, I fought for students and veterans who were being scammed by those for-profit colleges. As Vice President, I have stood up for workers and seniors, and as President, I will fight for all the American people, always. Like, I want you to shout your own name for a minute. Let's do that really quickly. Shout your own name for a minute. That's what I'm talking about, because it's about you. It's about your family. It's about you. That's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm talking about. Because together, we will build a brighter future for our nation together. Donald Trump has a different approach. I don't need to tell you, he's full of big promises, but always fails to deliver. Always fails to deliver. So remember, he said he was the only one, you know how he talks, the only one who could bring back America's manufacturing jobs. Remember when he said that? And then America lost almost 200,000 manufacturing jobs when he was president, including tens of thousands of jobs right here in Michigan. And those losses started before the pandemic, okay? Making Donald Trump one of the biggest losers of manufacturing jobs in American history.
Donald Trump was also in Michigan today, where he held a rally tonight in Detroit, his first time back since insulting the city. Spoiler alert, it didn't go so well.
It's not love. It's not respect. I won't pay the bill for this stupid company.
And that was after it was reported that Trump was having trouble filling seats at that rally. Trump fans, perhaps even Trump himself, may be tired of his act. The 78-year-old Republican candidate canceled an appearance at the Trump-friendly NRA next week due to campaign scheduling changes. In recent days, Donald Trump has canceled an interview with 60 Minutes, CNBC, and an interview with NBC News senior business correspondent Christine Romans. Could it be because he doesn't want to answer questions about yet another stock market record close under the Biden administration? You can always count on Fox to deliver that great news.
We have green on the screen here. Dow is at a record. The S&P is at a record. This could change, though, in 5 minutes because these numbers are pretty close. The Dow is up 38. The S&P is up 23. S&P needs a gain of 18. The major averages for the week are tracking their sixth straight week of gains. The Dow and S&P, longest winning streaks of the year.
Or is Donald Trump just suffering from exhaustion? Today, Politico reports that Donald Trump has also canceled his appearance on The Shade Room, where earlier this week, Vice President Harris sat down with the Black-owned independent media company. Politico reports, quote, a Trump advisor told Shade Room producers that Trump was exhausted in refusing some interviews, but that could change at any time, according to two people familiar with the conversations. Today, Vice President Harris addressed those reports.
I've been hearing reports that his team at least is saying he's suffering from exhaustion. And that's apparently the excuse for why he's not doing interviews. And, of course, he's not doing the CNN town hall. He refuses to do another debate. And, you know, look, being president of the United States is probably one of the hardest jobs in the world. And so we really do need to ask if he's exhausted being on the campaign trail. Is he fit to do the job? And I think that's a question that is an open-ended question that he needs to answer.
Donald Trump did make time to visit Fox and Friends, where he said this.
What's your favorite farm animal?
Favorite farm animal?
What's the animal?
Well, this guy grew up in the city.
I'll tell you what I love. I love cows. But if we go with Kamala, you won't have any cows anymore because you're not allowed.
And then he seems to suggest that Abraham Lincoln could have avoided the Civil War.
Lincoln was probably a great president, although I've always said, why wasn't that settled? You know, I'm a guy that it doesn't make sense we had a civil war.
Well, half the country left before he got there.
Yeah. But you'd almost say, like, why wasn't that? As an example, Ukraine would have never happened in Russia if I were president.
After receiving that history lesson from the Fox host, Donald Trump seems to not know or not care that Abraham Lincoln took office after many slave states seceded to form the Confederacy, because the Confederate States were for slavery, unlike the Union, which was not. It was also treason against the United States of America. Why wasn't it settled? Who can know? Today, The Atlantic published an article titled, Trump is speaking like Hitler, Stalin, and Mussolini, saying, quote, Trump blurs the distinction between illegal immigrants and legal immigrants, the latter including his wife, his late ex-wife, the in-laws of his running mate, and many others. He has said of immigrants, they're poisoning the blood of our country, and they're destroying the blood of our country. He has claimed that many have bad genes. He has also been more explicit. They're not humans. They're animals. They are cold-blooded killers. He refers more broadly to his opponents, American citizens, some of whom are elected officials, as the enemy from within, sick people, radical left lunatics. Not only do they have no rights, they should be handled by, he has said, if necessary, National Guard or if really necessary, by the military. In using this language, Trump knows exactly what he is doing. Here's what Governor Walz had to say about Donald Trump's rhetoric in North Carolina yesterday.
He was at a town hall, but he got asked a real question. He got asked why he and his running mate are making up stories about legal migrants in this company, doubling down on disgusting stories and telling lies that the Republican officials in these areas are saying that's lies. The Republican governor of Ohio had to send state patrol to escort kindergartners to school because of the stuff they're saying. So look, they're begging him to stop. But okay, let's acknowledge this. There are outsiders coming into communities, stealing jobs, making life worse for people there, and they have names, Donald Trump and J.D. Vance. Those are the people coming there. Those are the people coming there.